Welcome to the show today. Hello, wonderful friends. Welcome to another energizing episode of Beyond Autistic Burnout. Today, we're diving into the world of navigating career shifts as a late identified ADHD and autistic humans and the exciting journey of unveiling joyful work. I'm thrilled to introduce our incredible guest, Shell Mendleson, an ADHD career coach who knows firsthand the power of embracing powerful work environments and purposeful work environments. During this episode, we'll explore key insights into decoding job satisfaction. Is it just me, burnout, or the job? Understanding burnout's impact on how passionate we do or don't feel about our work, and discovering how to create a work life that resonates with your strengths, needs, and sensory profile. Stay tuned for an enlightening conversation that promises to empower and guide you towards a path of career restoration and fulfillment. Let's begin this transformative journey together.
Welcome to Beyond Autistic Burnout, the talk show designed to empower ADHD autistic professionals like you to thrive in your career, life, and beyond. I'm Carol Jean Whittington, an ADHD autistic business professional who's not just surviving, but thriving after decades in burnout. And I'm thrilled to have you here with us. Each episode, I'll be joined by inspiring guests as we dive deep into transformative strategies and insights. We'll show you how to break free from burnout, ignite sustainable energy, and embrace your authentic self. Together, we'll navigate career challenges, nurture relationships, and excel in every aspect of life. It's time to fuel your success and embark on your journey of empowerment. Let's take this incredible journey together. Get ready to be an authentic leader and unleash sustainable energy in your life. Welcome to Beyond Autistic Burnout. Let's start thriving.
Well, we have quite the packed show for you today. Oh my goodness, I can't wait to get started. Let's see what we've got here. I have all kinds of amazing things planned for us. So let's kind of get going with some of the fun stuff. So tomorrow is August 23rd, and it is Women's Equity Day. So just a little heads up, if you are planning some posting or contents or articles, tomorrow is indeed Women's Equity Day. So here's some stats as we're going into this conversation around career. Only 14% of Americans believe they have a great job and would not change it. That's pretty slim, folks. 70% of all working age people are actively looking for a job change right now. Are you part of that 70%? I don't know. There's a bunch of us. This is a conversation that happens a lot. Shell and I are going to dive into some juicy goodness on this topic today. So what percentage of people make a career change? A recent poll found that approximately half, or 52%, of American employees are considering making a career change this year. 44% are already planning to make the switch. Are you one of those folks? Are you planning to make a switch? You know, in late identified life, this is something that comes up, and it's a common conversation that I have with my coaching clients in the Unveiling method. And it's, now that I know I'm autistic, now that I know I'm ADHD, I'm learning more about my needs, I'm learning more about my sensory profile, and I'm discovering that one of the main contributing factors of burnout is perhaps the environment in which I work, or the industry in which I work. And another element that shows up a lot, specifically in ADHD and autistic professionals who are late identified, is for some of us, me included in this, we have a resume or a CV that looks like it might be several different people because we've been in several different industries and different careers within our lifetime. And it can look very different from a traditional, I started in this particular path and, I've moved in this particular direction in a linear trajectory. I don't know that I do anything in a linear trajectory, to be honest. So I've got some great resources to kind of kick us off as we're starting this conversation today. So in a recent Markets Insider business article, my good friend Kira Day, who is the CEO and founder of the Passion Center, and she has been a passionate passion researcher for quite a long time now. The article is called "Stress is Not the True Villain of Working Life. It's the Passion Health Gap." says the Passion Center. So, a quote from Kira was, according to the Passion Center, the real enemy within the workplace is the lack of passion, which is a driver of disengagement. And I do kind of want to touch on burnout and how that can show up differently in different individuals and can be perceived as something that it may not be, that can often lead to some challenges within our career as well. So I've got the links down there to check that out. And there was another fantastic article that's out this week on LinkedIn by Farah Harris, who is wonderful. She talks all about emotional intelligence and emotional health. And is it worth it when saying no is the right decision? And I think a lot of us and I know for myself that in my journey of career changes throughout my life is, maybe I hit a burnout that was so bad. And for me, a lot of times I was thinking it was the job. And sometimes it was, but I think in retrospect, I also see that there were things that I didn't know. There were different management awarenesses within myself. But a lot of times it can be really scary, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you've got a lot of opportunities coming and you have a bit maybe of a scarcity or a FOMO, fear of missing out. And you say, I don't want to miss out. So I want to say yes. And then there's the other element of people pleasing for a lot of us, reforming people pleaser right here. And so we don't say no. And one of the most powerful questions that I was ever given from a mentor after my late identification was, I said yes a lot. I didn't say no because it didn't feel safe to say no. And I think when we're looking at career changes, it doesn't feel safe to say yes. And it doesn't feel safe to say no. We feel like we're kind of stuck because we chose this and there really isn't another option. And Shell's going to be bringing some interesting conversation and information around this, but it's such a place that I have experienced, and I hear people relaying the same experience to me. And it's like, and my mentor said to me, Carol Jean, how can someone trust your yes if they never hear you say no? I'm going to let that sit for a minute. How can they trust your yes if they never hear you say no? And I had to turn that internally as well, because there's a big trust factor within our own experience as late identified people. And I know that for myself, I didn't trust myself because things had said along the way that my judgment wasn't as quote unquote good as everybody else's, when actually it was pretty accurate. And when we're thinking about career changing, we really are also tapping into what is our gut telling us? What is our intuition, our higher knowing telling us? And sometimes we're also competing with those conflicting beliefs that we have around saying yes and no and the safety of that. So go check out that article by Farah Harris. And the links are down in the show notes for all of these things. And there's one more thing I would love to share with you. I was prolifically reading everyone's things today. I don't always get a chance to do that. But in a recent LinkedIn post by my dear friend, Hal Eisenberg, who is the CEO of the Eisenberg Leadership Academy, and he is a powerhouse and a thought leader in the education, in the education sphere, guys. And in this post, he said, imagine if we challenged our assumptions. Imagine if we embraced failure as part of the process. Imagine if we honored the process of self-discovery. Imagine if we viewed diversity as strength. Imagine if we recognized that curiosity is the driving force of learning. There are so many other what ifs and imagine ifs in this article. It will do your heart good. Go check it out. Hal is an incredible spark in the world, and I just adore him. He's also part of the Passion Center. And if you can join us on Wednesday nights over on the Passion Break, please do. It is a 30-minute powerful conversation. Guys, we are kicking off our new segment that starts next week with Brian Coletto, and our segment is called Networking with Brian Coletto. This is a new segment that we are kicking off, and Brian is a phenomenal correspondent, and he has joined the Beyond Autistic Burnout team here at the talk show. So be sure to tune in next week for that new segment. We're going to be peeking at all of the places that Brian has been this month. And he's also going to be giving us some inside tips on how he's navigating networking as an autistic professional. And another highlight is we take more of the rooms in our XXO Connect, because when we are talking about burnout, we are talking about consistent and chronic unmet needs. And those needs are not always what you think. It may not be food, shelter, and water. It could be belonging, connection, and authenticity. And at XXO, we are wired for connection. And I want to highlight one of the rooms that is hosted on Tuesdays. And this is my good friend, Tori McDowell. She is ADHD and autistic, and her room is confronting your inner critic. Tori is a phenomenal life coach for late identified humans, and she has co-occurring health conditions that she also shares on TikTok, her journey, and she's just a wonderful human being. And Eva and I were in the room with her today having phenomenal conversations. So XXO is a place for minds of all kinds to find connection, community, and belonging together. So please join us. The link's down in the show notes if you'd like to check it out. All right, let's move into today's conversation. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome our guest today, the remarkable ADHD career coach, advocate, and author, Shell Mendleson. Get ready for an insightful conversation on navigating career shifts as ADHD autistic humans and the path to unveiling joyful work. So let's dive in and welcome Shell to the stage with me here today. Shell, welcome to the show.
Hey, so great to be here, Carol. So great.
I am super excited for this conversation. You and I have really had an opportunity and a chance to get to know each other over the last few months. And we have had some humdinger, fantastic, really sparking conversations around careers, have we not, Shell?
We sure have. It always kind of gets the juices going, once you start navigating all that stuff and diving into it. It's just kind of, for me, it's an endless kind of conversation I could have forever. Seriously. I probably could spend hours talking about it and bore the hell out of everyone while I was doing it. But yeah, to me, it is just, so many people need to hear this information. So many people are kind of starving to figure it out. And I have been so blessed to be so happy doing this work, which is what has always driven me. Always driven me. Hey, Lynn. Oh my gosh, Lynn, I love it.
Hey.
And we got can I say hi to the people that are coming up?
Yeah, Brian's in the room. Hey, Brian, our correspondent. Hey, Brian. Oh my goodness, we got a great group hopping in. So you guys, let us know in the comments, where are you joining us from today? If you have any big burning career questions for Shell and I to dive into that you want to add to the conversation, please add those to the chat box. This is not a conversation at you, my friends. This is a conversation with you. So we're inviting you to join us in this today. So Shell and I have a couple of things that we kind of wanted to talk about and make sure that we highlighted, but we also just want to bring in what it is that matters to you. What is important to you? So Shell, as I was kind of talking about some of those stats and some of the things that I was finding that people were saying, hey, 52% of folks are looking for another job. 70% are actively looking. I mean,
14% are unhappy in their work. I mean, only 14% are happy. The other, what is it? Percentage?
The other the other. I don't do math in my head, but it was 76%. 76%. There we go.
Yeah, the other 76% in the world generally, because it's a global thing, are unhappy, and that's pretty pitiful. That's so sad to me. It's so sad. Let's fix that. Let's find a way to fix that. That's been my work. My lifelong work is to help people, as many people as possible, just know that there are other possibilities. There are ways to move out of that.
There are. There was one really big thing that I wanted to bring up. So last week, Oliver Fingauer from Advance the Disability Consultants and I hosted a lunch and learn event on Thursday and Friday. And we had a great group. We had a big global international group show up for both of these. We had people from Norway, we had people from all over the UK, all over the United States, Canada, you name it. We had all kinds of folks joining us because we were talking about managing ADHD autistic burnout at work. And one of the things that I talked about, and this was one of the highlights that I said, hey, what was your biggest takeaway from the lunch and learn experience that you had? And this was the big one that kept coming up for people. So I really want to share this today because I think it ties into a lot of what we're talking about right now, Shell. And that is when we are in our job and we're losing, kind of what Kira's talking about is our passion health. And you talk about passion and how we're going to start looking at that. We have to define, well, what does passion mean for us? How does it feel? How do we experience that? And when we hit burnout, for a multitude of reasons, those contributing factors always go back to chronic and consistent unmet needs and unmet sensory profile needs, because all of us, doesn't matter what our neurotype is, we have a sensory profile that gets impacted. And when we are in burnout, for a lot of us, especially if you're in a spicy pepper level 3, 4, or 5 on my spicy pepper burnout scale, you are probably only being able to show up and do exactly what the minimum requirement is for work, especially if you're in a ghost pepper level 5 or if you're in a habanero level 4. And what people were saying stood out for them in that conversation last week is I was pointing out that quiet quitting can be misidentified for someone who may be in burnout. Right. And what is interesting is that those who have been identified or labeled as quiet quitting, 30% of managers reported quiet firing those they perceive to be quiet quitting in return. And I think that when we're talking about our passion health, when we're talking about career changes, when we're talking about, late identification, and all of a sudden we're going, holy cow, I don't know that this is really the job for me now that I'm getting to know me better. And Shell, you've got some wonderful ways on how to start the conversation, because people come to you and they say, I'm unhappy in my career. What do I do? Where do we start, Shell?
Where do we start? Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I like to take the term passion and kind of turn it around a little bit. So it's because sometimes people feel like, oh my gosh, how am I going to sustain passion all the time? So rather than think of it as something that has to be there consistently day in and day out, think of it as sustainable attraction and interest in your work. Something that is sustainable and you're consistently attracted to it and you're consistently interested in it, which means you want to feel like it's something that is expansive, something you can grow with, something you can learn about on a continuous basis, ways that you can branch out and do different things with it. Our brains want to go in different places and we start moving in those directions. And I'll tell you about the image I use of the tree trunk for the foundation of your work, and the branches being where our brain wiring wants to go when we're ready to make a move of some kind, right? So that is the first thing that I want to say, is that passion, thinking that you've got to be passionate all the time, can be a little bit overwhelming for some people. Like, oh my gosh, I can't do that every day. I can't do that for 8 hours, 10 hours, or whatever it is that I work. But I know that I'm interested enough in this work that I can sustain that for a long time. I mean, I probably couldn't do this work 8 hours a day every day, So that means that when we're talking about things like the conditions that we need to work in, and we can get into that at some point, I think it's really important to have that conversation about what are the conditions that we need to not only prevent burnout, but to, and you mentioned, what was it? I love that term, sensory profile.
Sensory profile. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the sensory profile. I've never heard that term and I love it. And I'm going to steal it.
Go for it. It's yours. I have a
Yeah.
specific sensory profile assessment to create your sensory profile blueprint because your sensory
Yeah.
profile changes in burnout and it fluctuates.
Yeah.
You got to really know that. And when you're talking about your working environment, that's a really big component. And I love that you talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah, I mean, well, that's when I talk about working conditions, which spans both the physical and non-physical, which I get very much into detail about, and I have the people I work with get into a great deal of detail, so that you're almost creating your own what I call self-accommodation plan, so that you know before you move into something else, or even while you're in it, what it is that you need in great detail. And then you can parse it out and have the conversation with your employer, or in the interview, you can say, when I have these conditions, I am going to be the best employee ever. You will find that I will be the most productive. I will maintain interest in what I'm doing, maintain focus in what I'm doing. All of the things that you're looking for are going to be there when I have these conditions, right? And you can kind of read the room and figure out what the condition, when it's okay to sort of have that conversation. And you can also gauge how they're responding to you, in terms of whether or not you want to even take a job if you're in an interview and they respond negatively, or they don't respond at all, or there's this big hesitation and a little bit of eye rolling maybe. And then,
that.
with your employer, if you don't get any kind of a response from your employer, I always like to say, you had kind of touched on this, that it's not you. It's if you're really dissatisfied in your work and you're dreading getting up in the morning and you're dreading being there and you're having all kinds of issues or things happen, which tends to happen when you don't like your work at some point. A lot of people can fake it for a while, but then at some point it starts seeping through. There's no way you can
Oh
stop.
boy, does it. And then all of a sudden, it isn't just
It's like
seeping through, it's like the dam breaks.
the dam
I
break.
remember I was
Yeah.
working in the legal field, and I had a job that I absolutely loved it. I loved what I was doing,
Hmm.
but I didn't necessarily love the individual in which I was working with. And that created an environment where I woke up and I didn't recognize until I resigned from the job and was away for about a week, the physical weight that I was carrying.
Hmm.
And I don't know that we always, because I have alexithymia as well. So I don't know that a lot of us, even with different processing speeds and different, awarenesses around what we're feeling, when we're in a job, Shell, is this something that you kind of have a conversation around? I didn't feel until I got the contrast when I resigned
Yeah.
how draining that job was.
Right. Exactly. Well, I always like to say that when you're making, the right decision about the next career move, that's right for you as an ADHD or autistic individual, that you really need to check in with your feelings. It's a feelings process, that all along the way, you need to start noticing how you're feeling in any given situation, and to what extent it's creating like a dynamic where you can't get the work done, or you're just, stuck, or you're making mistakes, or you're looking at the clock like, when the heck am I going to get out of here? Right? So it's really important to notice how you're feeling. Feelings are everything for us.
And they
So
show up and they don't go away unless
they
you
don't
deal
go
with them.
away. They do
So,
not
Shell,
go away. Yeah.
no, they don't. So, we had some really good questions, and we had a question that came up, and it's come up a couple of different times
Mhm.
in some of our community groups in Mind Your Autistic Brain. And a lot of people are wondering, is it my job that's causing burnout in me to feel like I don't want to be in this job anymore? Because I remember maybe when I started, I was passionate or interested in what I was doing, but now I'm not.
Mhm.
Is it also maybe is it just me and I'm growing and changing? when I start to feel these things, and then it's also kind of like, well, what's the first step? When I start to have these feelings and I'm starting to see, and I'm not really sure how to pick through this, where do I start? I just know that this isn't working.
Well, I mean, having a roadmap helps, which is what I help. Once they've created that, you can actually look on it and see, oop, the people I'm working with aren't matching up with this. You mentioned, uh, yeah, you mentioned that you enjoyed your work, but the person you were working with was not the person you wanted to work with. What were those characteristics? What were the characteristics of that person? Because that can make or break whether or not you're going to be okay in that work. And when you're working for somebody else, keep in mind, when you're working for somebody else, you're always going to be subject to changes in employees, shifts in even where you sit, shifts in your environment, because you don't have as much control or any control of that. So that's the whole thing. That's why a lot of people with ADHD at least like to work on their own, or eventually find that they want to do their own thing and figure out how to do that. That's not uncommon.
It is. And Shell, one of the things, and I think this is something you and I've talked about before too, and it's sometimes it's the career or the industry is a fit, but it
Yeah.
might be that where you are isn't. So for
Yeah.
me, looking back on that particular job, it was a solo practitioner. And by essence, as my friend Tracy Borson is always talking about our personal brand, his personal brand was that it with pillars that didn't align with mine. They
Right.
were different values.
Different values. Exactly.
And that can be a really big part
Mhm.
of, I think sometimes we feel like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm just in the wrong job, but maybe it's just the wrong place.
Well, when you have the whole picture of what it is that you want, the culture of the kind of work that you want to, or employer or the company or the people or whoever, that culture is really important. And defining what that is for yourself, what is the one that is going to help you be your best self, be the most productive, be who you want to be, and feel good in what you're doing, is always going to it's going to come back to bite you if it's the wrong culture, if it's the wrong fit. So understanding that can mean, okay, maybe it's time to move out of this situation and start looking for something that's a better fit for me. So it's always about finding the fit, the thing that fits you the most. It's not you, it's the actual job you're in, and whether or not it matches up with what your needs are, which can be very nuanced, but need to be in great detail, need to be listed out, and something that you can visually see, visually compare, sift and sort opportunities with, and be, excuse me, and be able to say, yes, this is a good fit, this isn't a good fit, and maybe it's time to leave, maybe I need to make some shifts, maybe I can talk to the people I work with, even coworkers, to see if there's a better way to handle certain situations, maybe switch job tasks or something like that. I mean, when I talk about the physical and the non-physical conditions, it really gets to be, oh my gosh, everybody's calling me now. It really gets to be very, very specific and detailed and nuanced, right?
Yeah. So
So,
those are some of the things that may come up if you're staying within your industry and shifting to start looking at what would you say are some of the biggest challenges faced if you are changing to a whole new field or industry? What if you decide this really isn't my bucket? This is not my playground. I want a different sandbox altogether.
that's actually a very exciting place to be. Because when you know that, then you start knowing that, what you start asking yourself, what is it that I need to get there? What do I need to do? What kind of training do I need to get? Do I need to like go back to school? And if I do, what kind of school? Do I have to go to college? Is there a way to do it besides going to college, other than going to college? Um, are there internships I can apply for? Are there certifications I can get? There's so many different options out there for getting the kind of training. But when you talk to people who are in the field, which is part of what I insist on folks doing, which is that old informational, you've heard the term informational interviewing, but it's very specific to talking to people that are doing things you're interested in, as you're curious about, as I call it, the human research portion of figuring out what you want to do, right? The human research. It's not about interviewing for the job. It's not about feeling obligated to people please and take a job with that company or whatever. It's about just getting the information. And then when you figure that out, you have people who are actually helping you and networking with you and helping you move forward to pick the right training programs, pick the right opportunities to look at and ways to get there, different opportunities and ways to get there. So,
One of the things that comes up is, late identified life for a lot of us. It's 30s, 40s, 50s. I even have had people in their 70s and 80s. And,
yes.
my mom is 80 and she still works full time. She is a full-time preschool director. I mean,
Oh,
she
that's
is
awesome. I love hearing that.
She does not want to stop or slow down. I mean, she
That's so
had,
great. Yeah, I love
I
that.
mean, my mother had a heart cath and had a stent put in, and 2 days later she's back because her preschoolers are important to her.
It shows you when you love what you do that you retire. What the hell's that?
It
I
really
don't
does.
I don't
And
even know why I have to retire, because this is something I actually enjoy. So I would do it as like a hobby even. Sometimes your work can actually be your hobby, or learning about your work, or expanding into different aspects of your work. That's how it is for me, and that's why I could have retired. I don't want to retire.
I love that you say expanding into different aspects of your work, because I
Yes.
think that's part of the evolution of us as individuals. When we were
Mhm.
talking about Hal's wonderful art post that came out, and it was imagine if. And I said,
Mhm.
Hal, I'm going to flip this a little bit. I'm going to pull a Scott Frassard and I'm going to flip the script just a little bit. And I'm going to say, imagine when this is happening. Imagine when
Mhm.
this is taking effect. And I
Yeah.
think when we've been in a career for a while, there's different nuanced elements to it. And
Yes.
there's also a development of ourselves, that personal development aspect.
There's
And
both.
we have gained
Yes.
clarity, right? So I
Mhm.
love that you say also looking at different
Yeah.
aspects.
I call it the branches of the tree. Like, I've talked to a lot of podcasters and I go, look at what you're doing now. They're psychologists. And I talked to a film and industry, a film industry person who is a podcaster. I mean, going into different aspects, being drawn towards those things to want to do them and have fun at them as another branch of your foundation, right? My foundation is education. So I will always be an educator on some level. And I found so many different ways to keep my interest and to do the aspects of what I do in different ways and explore it. And whenever I feel that urge, it's like, I don't know about you, but with ADHD, we tend to have these ideas pop in our head every now and then.
No, I don't know anything about that at all, ever.
Nobody knows about that, right? Well,
And you forgot the caveat of like there's 20,000 of those ideas at one
yes,
time.
20,000. But for me, whenever I've been ready to move into a new situation, it's like this instantaneous thing that pops up and it sticks. It's like, how you throw spaghetti on the wall. This is the one that sticks, right? And
Right.
something keeps drilling at me to keep, moving in that direction and moving in that direction. And and for me, a lot of it is based on I have this purpose in my life and I have this mission to get the word out. How do I get it out better? What's the next thing I can do to get that word out or get that information out to people? And when you're in the right work, there's some aspect of that for you. It may look and feel a little bit differently than the way I'm describing it, but it's the same idea that you're just going to be moving and creating different branches of the tree and leaves that come off branches, right? So
Oh,
and things that
definitely.
grow on the other things.
All the
Yeah.
fruit, all the goodness. I love the
Yeah.
analogy because we could
Yeah.
really just go crazy with it,
Yeah, that's
especially
my
with our visual
analogy.
brain.
Yeah, it's funny in my work, I think in metaphors, which I think a lot of us do. And I kept saying things like the cream rising to the top and the tree trunk is your found. Finally, I have an ex-client that I worked with many years ago who's like a brilliant graphic artist who works on Canva. And anyone, Lynn, who just popped in, was in the class. She knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, and she did whenever I would have this metaphor in my head, I would say, "Can you," I kind of draw it out and I say, "Can you put this like on paper and make it look like something that makes sense?" And she would always do these brilliant graphics. So it's so nice to have somebody that I can say, "I have this idea about how I want to communicate something," and she can put it on paper and make it look amazing.
Oh, that is
Yeah,
beautiful. So,
yeah.
Shell, I love that we're kind of bringing the conversation here because as we kind of start to unpick and we're looking at, okay, what are some of the challenges? What are some maybe the questions, the place where we might be starting in this?
Mhm,
I'm not sure if I want to stay here. I'm not sure if it's just elements of alignment or if it's just me staying in this career but branching out to different areas of it. I also
mhm,
want you to talk about the elements that make up ideal work as
mhm.
ADHDers and autistics. What are those elements to ideal work? So we have some idea of where we're headed.
So, well, you're speaking my language, of course. That's everything, right? The different elements that make up your ideal work. As Richard Bowles, who wrote What Color is Your Parachute? And I use the parachute model. And this was his brilliant process that I've adopted for people with ADHD. The first one are the skills that you want to be using, your preferred skills. And there's a whole process around that. The characteristics, not the names of people, but the characteristics of people that you want to be working with. The working conditions, we talked a little bit about that, and that gets very much into detail, into creating your self accommodation plan with your what's the profile, sensory profile that would be included in that. Okay. And then the fields and industries and special knowledges that you've learned, things that you're attracted to, classes that you've taken, things that you've always thought about but maybe put on the back burner, but now they're popping up again. They're coming to life one more time. So those special knowledges and industries. So looking at the kinds of industries that you're attracted to, curious about. So always remember, curiosity is a big part of it. It is not, you don't have to marry yourself to any of it. You just need to be curious. Like, what do I want to know more about? What is it that keeps coming up? But I've stopped myself over and over again from exploring it because I thought, hell, I can't make any money at this. Or what would so and so think? Or, if I do this, how's it going to change my life? I'm going to have to I can't live here anymore. I've got to, all these things
Or
that
how's it going to show up in my relationship with my partner?
exactly. That's a big one. That's a big one. And that's why when when I work with people, I put them in what's called the career bubble. And I tell them you're not to speak to anybody about what you're coming up with. This is
I
your
love
private
that
time.
because people can be really judgy.
You have to give yourself a break from all of that. And it's not that the voices, all that stuff's still going to come in your head. It's not going to go away, but at least you won't have the eyes rolling. You won't have somebody saying, yes, but honey, have you ever thought about doing blah, 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 blah? Or I know somebody I can refer you to that, da, 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 all these things
That's
that
exhausting.
it's exhausting and it doesn't work and it stops you in it can stop you in your track, especially because we're people pleasers. A lot of
It
us, like
really
you
kind of
said.
burns that
Yeah.
bridge of possibility. And as Robin Sharma calls it, being a possibilitarian, I think it almost just like throws the water on the fire of your possibilitarian
I love
expanse, right?
possibilitarian. Yes, you want to expand your possibilities and bring on the possibilitarian, I guess. Grow your inner possibility. I don't know. I'll have to come up with a good one for that. But I like that. That's a good one.
Robin Sharma, that's his word, and I just love it.
It's good. It's good. Yeah. So it does, having the career bubble, kind of like being in this little space where you're just working with other people going through the same process, and you're all like safe with each other because you're speaking the same language now, and you're exploring the same kinds of things. And that will help to some degree. It doesn't help throughout the whole, forever, because you're always going to have to deal with your spouse, or if they are threatened in any way by what you're coming up with, like, oh my gosh, they're having all those thoughts about how you're going to make money at this, how are we going to do this, blah blah blah. That's going to end that whole ability to just research and be expansive about considering, expanding on the ideas that you're coming up with. You have to have room to just have explore every single thing that you've ever thought about from the time you were a little kid. You
See,
actually
and
have
this is
to
what
have
I love
room.
about you, Shell, because you bring in this element of play and
Yeah,
discovery. It really is, it's play. And I think that also
yeah,
kind of goes back to your roots of entrepreneurial creativity, because that's part of your background.
yeah.
It's play, isn't it?
It is play, to some extent. Yeah, I mean, when you're thinking about this stuff, you really do have to think about the things you enjoyed playing when you were a kid, the things that you were I always say attracted to, because our brains, we got to be attracted to that thing. There has to be some kind of a magnet pulling us in that direction, right?
Oh,
It
most
has
definitely.
to be
You better
there.
spark me
Yeah, you
or
got to
you
feel
lost
that
me.
spark. Yeah, and I think we try always. So many of us have tried to cram ourselves, a square peg in a round hole kind of thing, and it never works. It might work for a while, even a few years, but then it's not going to anymore. It's going to stop
No,
working.
because it creates what I call the integrity gap,
Yeah,
when who we know ourselves to be internally is not who we are being on the outside and how we are living and the
right.
actions that we're taking. And the wider that integrity gap between who we know ourselves to be and actually how we're showing up in the world, that
Hmm.
integrity gap, not a lack of integrity, but the gap between living your authentic life is really big. And for a lot of us in late identified life, if we've masked or camouflaged to the, masking to the professional level of camouflaging, as I call it, that's a big part of this discovery that you're talking about when we're
Yeah.
looking at our career, is getting down to really who am I, and allowing space to maybe allow it for the first time in your life.
And it's not an easy place to be. I mean, because of all the barriers we've had, barriers that you continue to have if you're going to a job you don't like every single day. You have that more and more layers of barriers of uh, limitations, feeling limited and like you can't do it. And if you have an over analyzing, if you tend to over analyze or analyze a lot, I'm not um, trying to say people that are analytical that's a negative thing, characteristic. It's just that in this process it can hinder you, because what I find are people, when they tend to analyze, that prevents them from taking the steps they need to take very often. Yeah.
What I hear you saying is, if you are staying safe by choosing to stay in the thought loop
Yes.
without choosing a direction and taking action
And
or
just being
moving,
curious,
being
allowing for that
curious.
curiosity,
Yeah.
allowing yourself to talk to people and to do a little bit of research. Just do a Google search, talk to somebody in an organization, who, like an organization of people that you're thinking, well, maybe it'd be cool to consider this, right? Um, anyway, there's so many ways to go about it that we stop ourselves from doing, because we start thinking it's not possible. We cut ourselves off from the possibilities. I can't say that enough. Bowles calls that the safekeeping self. And we use that term, the safekeeping self, a lot in the work that I do. And I try and ask people, and this is for your audience as well, to start noticing when you might be doing that. The first time you notice that the little safekeeping ghoul is sitting on your shoulder, that's what I call it. I always see it as this like ugly little thing kind of peeking in the door, ready to stop you from wherever you want to go. But whenever it's there, the first time is that recognition. It really is it's a big leap from just blindly thinking you can't do something or it's not possible to, oh, okay, maybe I'm the one who's stopping myself from doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's one I had to really work through
I do too. We
and
all do.
recognize.
Listen, it's common. It's not something everybody has some form of it in some aspect of our lives, right? When it comes to career, though, it can really be a hindrance for people who are just staying safe in situations that are not, they're safe for a while until they're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's really the thing. It's like, but are you really safe?
You're not really safe.
You're just avoiding being uncomfortable in change.
Yes.
Sometimes that's the big thing. And that's kind of a hard one for those of us who are also autistic. Because, I was talking to my friend yesterday and she and I were doing some body doubling. And because we both had some pretty significant lists of things that we wanted to accomplish. And we said, let's just body double for about 90 minutes. And we were talking about that. And she goes, because she's just ADHD and I'm ADHD and autistic. She goes, Carol Jane, is there like a war that goes on in your head between like the things that you want to like go and do as the ADHD and then like the structure and staying, in routine as the autistic person? I'm like, heck yes. And I think that also comes into when we're thinking about and planning career changes or any type of change in our life. We also have to look at what is our wiring, what is our natural default for something so that we're feeling comfortable. It's also, was it meeting our need for how we process information?
Yeah.
And I love that you also approach the career planning from a neuro-inclusive perspective. It's not just like everybody processes career this way. What are some of the elements that you have seen or that you bring in how people process and go through this journey, career?
It's different for everybody. Like you said, everybody has their different ways of processing information. Generally, people will tell me, and I do the best I can to accommodate. Sometimes it doesn't work out so well. Sometimes it does. Mostly it does, I think, because as long as we're communicating, I think it's the communication that's really important. Being able to just come out and say, look, I need to take a break, or I need to give myself some space to think about this, or I have to do this incrementally, which I think is true for pretty much everyone. And that's why I like to use the term curiosity, because you're not married to any one thing. You are just curious. Like, would this, I'm kind of this kind of is interesting to me. And you know what? It's been interesting to me from the time I was a little kid. Maybe it's time to start exploring it a little bit, or find ways that I can bring it into the work, somehow bring aspects of it into the work I'm doing, or maybe branch off into some aspect of it. It's like you don't have to shut the door on everything that you're attracted to, or things that you think are not going to work for you. You don't have to just shut the door because it's not quote unquote realistic. You have to create it. You have to define it. You have to be able to explore it, and in whatever way works for you. So I'm not as well versed on the processing profile. What is it called? Is it the processing profile, or how did you say it?
We talk about different processing speeds and needs.
Yeah. So I really think that there is a way that you can do all this work and do it in a way that works for you. You have to do it in a way that works for you. I like to take everything into consideration. And when I'm presenting information to people, I do take the ADHD mind. So I come from the ADHD perspective of graphically presenting things as much as possible with content, breaking things down as much as possible, um, and doing things very step by step, but having a structure. That's why this process works so well for people, is because it allows you to be creative within that structure, right?
So here's my question, because I had a client. I was telling her that we were coming on here, and they were really curious, and they said, "How do I just like not blow up everything that I've built, but I want to explore different avenues without quitting my job that I have, but I am putting every bit of energy that I have into the job currently that I don't feel like I have space to even mentally or emotionally start to look at possibilities." How do we start to navigate this in ways that feel manageable, Shell?
Well, you have to know what you want first.
And how do we do that?
Well, you have to, I hate to say it, go through the process. It's a
What's the
nuanced kind
step?
of
What's the
thing.
first step in the process, would you say?
I
Where
did.
do you take people? What's your first step?
Oh, I have them. Well, I have them write story. They have to, they write stories about
Mhm.
positive experiences, and writing the stories. They part of the process is writing 7 stories, and each one of the stories is something that they experienced in a positive way, even though it may have been a challenge. The whole experience of it was uplifting in some way. They benefited from it. They learned something, or they just simply enjoyed it, right? So writing those kinds of stories, and then extracting the skills that you used in those stories, very empowering, very amazing.
Oh man, I'm like getting the tingly excitement over here
Yeah.
thinking about this. Like I can't wait to go back in and dig into my own stories for this. So Shell,
Yeah.
you and I had a conversation and you brought up something I thought was really interesting. And you were
Mhm.
talking about purpose-driven people. And you were telling me that it's usually around the age 39 that you see people are really having this moment of like, I don't know if this is the right career for me. And you're
Yeah.
starting to see some of this earlier and earlier in these
Earlier and earlier.
self-awareness reflections. What are
Yeah.
purpose-driven people? What are some of these things that maybe might be hitting some of our listeners and watchers today?
It's just realizing that it's work is not just about what you can do and what you've got maybe the ability to do. It really is about what is important to you, what is the purpose beyond it. And people start realizing that they can go to their job every day and realize, what is this doing for the world? How am I making a difference? How am I personally making a difference in this work? I mean, and it could be very like the culture of it, everything could be like right on purposeful. But if you don't feel like you're making a contribution individually, because you're not, and very often that happens when you're in the wrong work, even if it's a great company and it's got they say all the right thing, the right mission, all that. That's not the point. The point is it has to be satisfying for you and fulfilling for you. And that means that you feel like it's not just about money. It's about making a contribution on some level. So
Yeah.
that has to be there. We spend too many hours a day in those jobs, day in and day out, right? And you've got to have a reason to be there, something that's at some point. And I think that is happening much earlier than 39. That was when I first started doing this work. That was the average age. But now it's like even the Zoomer generation, I'm seeing it. And because a lot of the parents are sort of, I get calls from parents all the time to help their kids, their adult children, right? Because they know what it's like to go through that, and they see their adult children kind of going through the same process, and now it's like they want to stop it, kind of cut it off at the pass, so they can really live a full life in a career that they love, or one that they really find fulfilling over a long period of time and sustainably fulfilling.
Oh, I love that. Sustainably fulfilling.
Yeah.
So, Shell, as we're wrapping up, talk to me about compelling vision.
Compelling vision. Okay. Well, I have people do this exercise at the end after they've completed everything, and now they can actually start to visualize in real, like, in first person, real time. I am now doing these things with my time is this way. Every day I get up and it, we do these things, or I do these things. I in the work I'm planning this. So it's like having a real time vision of what your life looks like once you're kind of on that track of doing the work that you're supposed to be doing. And that includes your family, that includes your friends, that includes your life outside your work, of course. That now you have time to do certain things. For example, like you can spend time working on maybe interests, avocational kinds of interests that you have, or you're doing volunteer work, or you're doing whatever. You see like a full life. It's more the bigger picture of everything. So, I've had people write compelling visions that blew me away. One of them should be a novel. I remember it was, uh, see, how do I put it? He was working in a bank, in a credit union, and pretty severe ADHD in terms of just, I don't know, like me. I see him more like, I put myself in that category so I could relate to where he was at. And he was miserable, obviously, and he was on the verge of getting fired because he was making all these mistakes. And he was brilliant. I mean, it has nothing to do with intelligence, all right? Has nothing to do with ability. Our brains, if we're not doing the work that we enjoy or are attracted to, we are going to make mistakes at some point. Things are going to
Yeah,
happen.
because we'll disengage.
He exactly. And they called him on the carpet a few times, but as he went through this process, he realized that he was a historian, and he wanted to take people on adventures, and travel adventures, and he wrote his compelling vision in such a way that he described what it would be like to take people to different, like, dig sites or places where they were experiencing different things, and in such great detail. It was almost breathtaking. Really, it was amazing.
Oh, I
Yeah.
want to go already just hearing you tell about
I want
it.
to go. Well, can you imagine being led by somebody who's that passionate about it?
Yes.
That was. I
Yes.
mean, he went from being like working in a credit union and some horrible job for him to this big vision for himself that was something completely different. And
And did the play and possibilities get him there? And the
um,
safety to play in a bubble?
he had to. Yeah, I think he had some personal, like, issues to deal with along the way, but he was exploring it. He was at least in that exploration process. I mean, that's the thing. Is like you're not going to it. Sometimes it's incremental, right? It's incremental.
Oh
So
yeah, definitely. Because
yeah,
we can only envision just so far when we stretch. So
yeah,
we can have our compelling vision and you all of you guys out there that are unveilers, we're talking about like this is very similar to our Thrive destination statement
yeah,
where we dream and craft and create what our life is and who's in
yeah,
it and what it looks like in the day.
yeah,
And I love that you were talking about that. You know, you create and help create this compelling vision, this Thrive destination statement where we can get real granular and we can dream without limits.
yeah.
Because
And the thing,
truly, the only limits we have are the ones we put on ourselves.
yes, and the thing that's really, when I first learned how to do the process of compelling vision, it was presented as the first thing that we did instead of the last thing that we did, which made no sense to me because there were people who
I
didn't have a
agree.
clue.
I
They
was
didn't
like, you
have a
gotta have the
clue.
parts to create it. You hadn't
You
even found the parts yet.
yeah, you have to start building that foundation a little bit of what you want. And then you can take off and have this real vision of where you see yourself ultimately, and it makes it much more compelling and something that can is possible, that can actually be done or have some possibility of actually happening, right?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Yes. Shell, you have been a wealth of information and insights today. And I love, love, love what you're doing in the world. So
Thank
let's
you.
share where people can get in touch with you.
Oh,
Let's
I
tell them about
love it.
creating your smile file.
So this is something, one of those things that came to me, like a million ideas. That the term smile file just came up, and how do you create it was like it just popped out, and I put it together. And this is an example of this brilliant graphics person, Katrina. Katrina, you're not listening, but hopefully you will listen. She's helping me with the book. She's doing all the graphics for the book, the whole thing. Anyway, this is an example of how that looks when you kind of download the whole thing. So you can go to the website at careercoachingwithshell.com and scroll down and sign up for the smile file. I have people signing up every day for the smile file and
Now,
get
what do we
started.
get in the smile file?
Well, it's a way for you to start identifying things that literally, it's just like it says, it makes you smile, things that make you smile. And they don't have to have anything to do with career at all. They can just be like, what is it that makes me smile? Take pictures of it, find a receptacle you want, use your a file on your phone, whatever you want to, however you want to store the information. Pictures are always good,
Oh
something
my
that you can
goodness.
access. And then you start to see a pattern, you start to see things kind of repeat themselves, and it's kind of the first step in getting a little bit of clarity about a direction that you may find interesting and be curious about.
Oh, that is fantastic. And you have something really phenomenal coming up in December. And I have been so blessed to be able to have a conversation with you. And you've shared a little deeper insight into your new book coming out in December. Can you tell us just a little bit about this?
Oh, I love it.
Unlock your career. Oh my gosh,
There
it
it
looks so
is.
good.
Yes, this is a course for ADHD adults and teens. I wanted to include teens because teens can, very use this. They're the ones that need it before they make decisions about college, before they make decisions about anything, and certainly for adults before they make decisions about taking any direction at all, spending any money on, classes, shiny object classes. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Before you spend another dime. So what it is,
Nice.
it's going to be literally my class kind of in a book. And it's everything that I have in the class is actually there compiled in the book, and it's step by step, and every page is graphic. Um, and so there's how many years? 35 years of putting info together and just putting it into some kind of readable format and workable format. You see how it's spiral bound? It's spiral bound, so you
Yes.
can lay it flat and you can write it.
Features, that was one of the things that we talked about that I love because you've got lots of visuals in here, lots of graphics,
And it's
to
not
spiral
easy to
bound.
find printers who do this. I mean, Amazon does not print spiral
Nope.
bound. So
Trust me, I know as the founder of Hyperlexic Publishing, this is definitely one of the things that we had to put together as well. So guys, be sure you go and connect
yeah.
with Shell. Go get your smile file. Start
Yeah.
with the fun things and that first step, and
And when
definitely
you do
make
that,
sure.
you'll be on the list for when the book actually is launched to know when that is. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Shell, thank you so much for being with us today. And I've got a few more announcements and things to share with you guys as we close up our episode today. If you are in burnout or suspect that you're in burnout and you need to figure out what degree of burnout you're in, take my spicy pepper quiz. It's going to help you identify from a poblano pepper level 1 all the way up to the ghost pepper level 5, where you might be so hot you're not. Go take that quiz. Find out what degree and what level of spicy pepper burnout that you might be in, because I have something to help you. This week on Thursday and Friday, if once you take the quiz, you automatically can access signing up for either Thursday or Friday, where you can come join me live to build your spicy pepper dashboard for restoration. There's limited seats. I'm going to be taking you through the process because I have a strategic plan on how each spicy pepper level gets out of burnout. This has been my life's work over the last decade, and I have put everything together to help you begin your restoration journey, to get out of burnout and to stay off that chronic cycle burnout loop for good. Next week, join me on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for an incredible conversation with Dr. Jordan Carmack, Dr. Scott Freisart, and Dr. Ali Arena. We are going to be talking all things using AI, artificial intelligence, in job applications, leadership, and communication for ADHD autistics. We have got a great conversation. The three of us have been working on this all summer, and we have some really interesting things that we have discovered. And we're going to be diving into that applicant tracking system that's being used, and we're going to look at what can we do to optimize our applications and resumes, because like we talked about with Shell today, 70% of folks are looking to change a job right now. How might AI be helping to do this for us? We are so excited to have you here each and every week. And as we wrap up this episode of Beyond Autistic Burnout, I want to remind you of your incredible brilliance. Embrace your uniqueness and know that your journey is one of strength and resilience. I'm Carol Jean Whittington, and I'm so honored to be on this journey with you. Stay connected with me for more empowering episodes, and let's continue to thrive together. Remember, you have the power to break free from burnout and unleash your authentic self. Until our next empowering conversation, take care and keep shining brightly. Be energized together. Bye-bye, guys.